Attorney General Pam Bondi claims the DOJ released all the Epstein files and even listed out 300 names. But we're seeing blowback saying that is not the end of the story. So we're going to go through some of the notable people named to understand what exactly their connection is, if any, to the accused child sex trafficker. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Well, after Attorney General Pam Bondi's battle in front of the House Judiciary Committee last week, where she was grilled on all matters Jeffrey Epstein, namely regarding redactions and whether there were in fact other co-conspirators or not. In fact, we did a whole sidebar on that. Bondi then sent a letter out to lawmakers over the weekend, saying that all the Epstein files have been released. And most importantly, she listed out over 300 high-profile names. Now, at first glance, you might be saying, wait a second. Did she just release the Epstein list? The list of Epstein's alleged co-conspirators, people who allegedly engaged in criminal activity, the abuse of young girls for years? That's why we have to put into context what this is about, okay? Because I'm going to go over the letter, I'm going to go over the names and try to make sense of it. Because a few things here, as we have previously reported, the DOJ indicated that there is no central Jeffrey Epstein client list that he had prepared. There's no little black book for people who knew about or participated in criminal activity and that he kept as a form of blackmail. This is not surprising. I never thought that there was anything like this. There's no evidence of that. There is an address book that we've talked about here on Sidebar before. It's not the same thing. And to be clear, I'm going to say this over and over again, just because someone is mentioned in the files or mentioned in an address book doesn't mean that they knew about or engaged in criminal activity. So let me briefly summarize the letter and then I'll get into the names, okay? So in a letter that was dated this past Saturday, February 14th, this is addressed to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chairman Chuck Grassley, Ranking Member Dick Durbin, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, and Ranking Member Jamie Raskin. The letter explains that under the newly passed Epstein Files Transparency Act, the DOJ has to explain everything that was released. And remember, this was an act that said, you got to turn over everything in your possession. So one of the things they have to do under the law is they have to explain what was released. They have to explain a summary of all the redactions and the legal basis for them. And this is the key. Quote, a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in the released materials. Okay, they had to list this out. So first, some context here. Pam Bondi explained that they released all the files in their possession regarding 9 categories. Basically, anything about Epstein, anything about Ghislaine Maxwell, flight logs or travel records, associated government officials and entities, immunity deals, internal Department of Justice communications regarding not charging someone or prosecuting someone, anything about destroying Epstein data and materials, and any materials surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death. That's basically a summary of what they had to release. Now, in terms of what was withheld from public disclosure, the letter explains that there are those records that were subject to certain privileges, like attorney-client privilege, but the letter made clear that no records were withheld that were merely just embarrassing to someone, and that they tried to remove personally identifiable information about victims, although, as I'm sure you heard from various reporting, there were allegations that the DOJ failed to 100% do that. And then we get this, quote, below is a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in the released materials, although the letter explains that politically exposed person, not really well defined. But there is a footnote of the list that says, any omissions from the list are unintentional and, as explained in the previous letters to Congress, a result of the volume and speed with which the department complied with the act. Individuals whose names were redacted for law enforcement sensitive purposes are not included, meaning if there's an ongoing investigation. Now, I'm not going to read you all 300 names. We're going to put it up on the screen here, but this is an example of some names. Jay-Z, Beyonce, Steve Bannon, George W. Bush, Bill and Hillary Clinton, George Clooney, Ron DeSantis, Richard Branson, Fidel Castro, Kurt Cobain, Mick Jagger, Cory Booker, Jeff Bezos, Joe and Jill Biden, Michael Cohen, James Comey, David Copperfield, Robert De Niro, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Jared Kushner, Janis Joplin, Donald Trump, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Ivanka Trump, J.D. Vance, Chris Tucker, Rupert Murdoch, Gavin Newsom, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Elvis Presley, Brett Ratner, Alyssa Milano, Elon Musk, Larry Nassar, Barack Obama, Tucker Carlson, Rosie O'Donnell, Bill Gates, Rudy Giuliani, Nikki Haley, Leon Black, Woody Allen, Alex Jones, Michael Jackson. Okay, so that's just a sampling of the names. Obviously, there are a lot more. Now, I'm going to get to what this means, but before I do that, Real quick, gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, OneSkin. You have to take care of your skin. Look, as we get older, dryness, deeper wrinkles, it can be very frustrating, but OneSkin's OS01 face moisturizer is a game changer. At the core of OneSkin is their patented OS01 peptide. This is proven to target senescent cells at the root of aging. It's not hype, rigorous science that restores elasticity, boosts hydration, combats fine lines on the cellular level. And one of the things you're gonna love about OneSkin is the texture and how easy it is to fit into your routine. Their products are designed for layering, so it's just a few simple steps. You're good to go. Major editors in the beauty industry have also named OneSkin a leader in skincare. They have over 10,000 five-star reviews, all reporting the same thing. Smoother, firmer, healthier looking skin. Born from over a decade of research, OneSkin's OS01 peptide is proven to target the invisible signs of aging. And for a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off using code SIDEBAR at oneskin.co/sidebar. And after you purchase, support our show, tell them we sent you. You are seeing a lot of pushback from lawmakers. Someone who has been particularly vocal in response to this letter is Representative Nancy Mace. She went on X, said, quote, "Despite the memo released by DOJ last night, not all the Epstein files have been released, and the excuses provided for not releasing all the files will not hold up in a court of law. This isn't going away until people go to jail." There's another one. "Where are all the logs from the receptionist station at Epstein's New York home? They kept track of underage children and people in power coming and going." Here's another one. "Where is all the audio and video from the Lolita Express," meaning Jeffrey Epstein, jet? Then you had Representative Ro Khanna, quote, "The DOJ is once again purposefully muddying the waters on who was a predator and who was mentioned in an email. To have Janis Joplin, who died when Epstein was 17, in the same list as Larry Nassar, who went to prison for the sexual abuse of hundreds of young women and child pornography, with no clarification of how either was mentioned in the files, is absurd. Release the full file, stop protecting predators, redact only the survivors' names." So why are all of these people listed? And I really want to focus more on names we haven't talked about as much. Like we've already discussed in previous episodes of Sidebar, the Clintons, President Trump, director Woody Allen's connection to Epstein, Elon Musk's back and forth with Epstein or his people regarding meeting up. Actually, I'll tell you what, before I even get to other names, one more thing about Musk that I thought was interesting, and this was outlined in a Fortune article. The files allegedly reveal a scheme by Epstein to get close to Musk's brother, Kimball, and even tried to handpick a woman for him. Like you have this email from an Epstein associate, Boris Nikolic, to Epstein in 2012 that says, "Just talk to Kimball. His actual birthday is on Thursday night, although his party is on Saturday. Kimball, Elon, and few of their closest friends will go out that night. I told him that you will join us as well. Also, I told him that you are coming with redacted and that he might want to ditch his ex or current-to-be. He said yes and is looking so much forward. So please prepare redacted. She might like Elon as well." And then you see how Epstein even tried to seemingly leverage that to get close to Elon Musk, where Epstein wrote Musk in one message, "I will be in New York for next week. We'll see your brother in his new romance." And of course, you have people like Bill Gates, Microsoft's founder, already well established that he had a connection to Epstein. There are photos of him in connection to Epstein. I talked about this in a previous Sidebar. It was reported that there was this bizarre email where Epstein alleged that Gates needed medication to treat an STI from having sex with Russian girls. Bill Gates has denied all of this. But anyway, giving you an idea about the big names. So what about the other names? Now I'm going to give you the caveat that is laid out by Pam Bondi in her letter. It says, quote, "Names appear in the files released under the acts in a wide variety of contexts. For example, some individuals had extensive direct email contact with Epstein or Maxwell, while other individuals are mentioned only in a portion of a document, including press reporting that on its face is unrelated to the Epstein and Maxwell matters." Like, for example, you might have somebody like Elvis Presley, obviously no connection to Jeffrey Epstein, but then you get a Prince Andrew, who we've, by the way, talked about extensively in another episode of Sidebar where we talked about the royals' connection to Epstein. So that is what I want to provide context and explanation for, because listing these out, people might jump to conclusions, but let me try to explain it. So for example, a name like rock singer Janis Joplin. You know why she's in there? She was referenced in a mass email that BCC'd Jeffrey Epstein. And in the email, it listed music of the week. Quote, "Janis Joplin, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Piece of My Heart." Seemingly innocuous, although interesting because there appears to be a redacted line underneath this sentence. What about Nirvana's Kurt Cobain? Why is he in there? So in an informational email that was sent to Epstein from popular in your network, info@twitter.com, One of the things it seems to recommend for him is an article remembering Kurt Cobain on the 22nd anniversary of his death. So as you can see, it's not like Joplin or Cobain were somehow connected to Epstein. Again, wouldn't even make sense given the time frame. And then you have somebody like former President Barack Obama, where from what I could see, it was just a lot of articles about Obama in the files release, like news articles. I didn't find any direct ties between Epstein and the former president. Same kind of thing with Bruce Springsteen. Mentions of him are about tickets and concerts and email blasts. So as you go through this list, and maybe you're going to go on the DOJ's library yourself, just keep that in mind. But what about somebody like actor George Clooney? Now this is interesting because on one hand, you have Clooney mentioned in certain aspects. Like there was an email sent to Jeffrey Epstein in 2011 saying, quote, "Reminder, today is the day Peggy was hoping you could be in Venice with her for the Clooney opening. Pacino to be there," seemingly in reference to Al Pacino. Now Peggy seems to be in reference to Peggy Siegel, big-time publicist, frequent communication with or about Epstein. We mentioned this before, but there was an allegation that she even tried to do damage control for Epstein when all these allegations were coming out. But then you have this email titled Toronto Film Festival, this is back in 2009, from Peggy Siegel to Epstein, where it says, "Had a great time in Toronto, saw everyone, George Clooney, Michael Douglas, Jeffrey Rush, Drew Barrymore, etc. Saw all studio execs, more important." How about this one, from Siegel to Epstein from 2011? "This email to George Clooney gives you an idea how successful my Venice trip was. Accomplished so much. Hung and discussed their work with George Clooney, Kate Winslet, Keira Knightley, Colin Firth, Al Pacino, on and on. We have working on all the hot films. Have to write my story now. Miss you. Want to see you when in New York City. XOXO Peggy." So not really sure what to make of that, unless of course she's just sharing with him her exploits, or he likes being involved or connected to the rich and powerful and wants to make connections, and she might be the conduit. I don't know. But then there's this one we got to talk about. So someone writes Epstein in 2010, quote, "Can I have a muse same as George Clooney? In fact, what about George Clooney?" Epstein writing back, "In your present position, it should be George Clowney." Now at the bottom of the email string, it says Peter Mandelson, somebody we've talked about before, the British politician who came under a lot of fire for emails that surfaced with him and Epstein, particularly celebrating and congratulating him when he was released from prison after his conviction on Florida state charges of solicitation of prostituting a minor. That's a little weird. Then you have this email too from Epstein to someone back in 2014 with the subject line, "Clooney in Copenhagen, quote, now I know Copenhagen has interesting girls. Ask Gianni if you should see agencies on his behalf." This is what Epstein writes back. So I don't know what to make of these Clooney emails per se, but the actor has never been accused or implicated in wrongdoing in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. But obviously I got to mention this. And then you got these notable people that have a more direct connection with Epstein, like actor Chris Tucker. Okay, you have this email from 2013 that reads, "Chris Tucker will be stopping by to see J.E. sometime before his show tonight. No exact time was given." And we already know there were photos of Tucker in connection with Epstein, like there's one with him and Ghislaine Maxwell that has been circulated quite a bit. What about Jay-Z? So Jay-Z presents an interesting one to follow. There is a 2019 FBI crisis intake memo where someone back in July of 2019 apparently called the FBI Operations Center to identify herself as a victim of sexual abuse by Jeffrey Epstein and others. And later on it says, quote, "In approximately 1996, Redacted resided with Redacted in Redacted. An unknown man abducted Redacted from her home when she later awoke in the presence of Harvey Weinstein and Sean Carter, Jay-Z, while Weinstein had," and I'm not going to be too graphic here, "sexually abused her. Redacted believed she was in Epstein's mansion in Florida." Weinstein, of course, is the disgraced movie producer who was convicted of sex crimes. But I will tell you, this is very similar to a range of tips that authorities were receiving in the wake of Epstein's allegations that were potentially never corroborated. I mean, we discussed the same thing multiple times on previous episodes of Sidebar regarding the unsubstantiated sexual abuse allegations against President Trump, too. Just something to keep in mind. But names like Harvey Weinstein, not a great connection. Neither is Bill Cosby, okay? He too is mentioned in the Epstein files. Like this email to Epstein from 2013, quote, "Rich Barnett ran into Mr. Cosby's houseman on 71st Street. The houseman said, unfortunately, Mr. Cosby will be out west somewhere in California when you're holding the dinner on the 23rd. Otherwise, he would have loved to come." So this idea that Epstein just loved to be affiliated and associated with the rich and famous, and as we know, Cosby would later be accused and go to trial on sexual assault claims. This one was surprising. Former TV show personality Dr. Oz, who's an official in the current Trump administration. So there is an email from 2016 from Mehmet and Lisa Oz, that's his wife. And now remember, this is after Epstein's conviction on solicitation of prostitution charges of a minor. And this email is to Epstein, and it is actually an invite to Mehmet and Lisa Oz's Valentine's celebration. How about this one? Sent to Epstein in 2010. Rudy Giuliani could see you tomorrow, either at 12 or at 4:45. I'm not sure what time you arrive tomorrow, but I am thinking the 4:45 is better. Again, have to make the caveat. Just because he was invited places or had meetings with places doesn't mean these people are guilty of anything, okay? Why is Robert De Niro listed? Well, Epstein receives an email in 2013 that reads, "Hi, Jeffrey. Called redacted, but she never called back. Have been seeing redacted once in a while. Have lots to tell you. Call me when you," I think it says, "set up coffee deal with De Niro. Launched in Whole Foods under Grace of Rwanda. Best, Jonathan." So maybe trying to meet Robert De Niro, possibly another De Niro. There are more about the actor, though, too. So you go back to Peggy Siegel. How about this one, 2017, when she wrote, "Dear Jeffrey, I am volunteering to help the New York Film Society of Lincoln Center with their spring gala called the 44th Annual Chaplin Awards, honoring Robert De Niro on May 8th. The presenters include Whoopi Goldberg, Meryl Streep, Martin Scorsese, Ben Stiller, and Harvey Keitel. See attached invite. I need to talk to you about the possibility of you buying a table that I can fill with movie stars, and hopefully you can attend." Now, Epstein was also on an email blast from an account that was set up for Jane Rosenthal and Robert De Niro back in 2015 regarding the Tribeca Film Festival, which the actor helped to found. But as you'll see, it's just an example of his connections to powerful people. And while I couldn't find, let's say, a direct email between Robert De Niro and Jeffrey Epstein, let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg for a second, okay? Facebook. How about this message? Quote, "Leslie thanks. The things I discussed with Jeffrey were for he and Woody," seemingly Woody Allen, "to visit Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook or for Mark to join them at dinner. I've sent Mark the options and I'm waiting to hear back." How about this? "Andrea, could you also please pass along the below link to Mark from Jeffrey? Thanks." Again, this is Leslie, Jeffrey Epstein's assistant. How about this one? "Here are the details for the Sunday dinner. Attendees are," and it lists out Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Jeffrey Epstein. There are more names on there too. I mentioned Hakeem Jeffries, so getting into the political space. Seems at the very least, Epstein was kind of keeping a careful eye on the Democratic politician out of New York. He was forwarded an article about the rising star in 2013. Epstein also received an email, could be an email blast. It says, "Dear Jeffrey, I hope you received an invite to the party that Congressman Hakeem Jeffries this Wednesday night in Manhattan. Comptroller-elect Scott Stringer will be leading the celebrations in what promises to be a great night." Again, didn't find any direct connection or direct email between Hakeem Jeffries and Jeffrey Epstein. What about George Soros, the investor? Email sent to Epstein in 2011. "Thank you, just landed in New York, was terrific. Flew over your island coming back from Necker to St. Thomas. George Soros and Richard Branson loved your question about dictators hiding money." Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. You have this email from 2018 to Jeffrey Epstein where it reads, "Jeff Bezos at SMU Friday. Worth seeing if I'm not still sick?" Epstein replies, "Yes, you can say hello from me." So was there a connection between Bezos and Epstein? Also this one from Peggy Siegel to Epstein in 2009. "Just left Ghislaine's townhouse, after party for film. Bill Clinton and Jeff Bezos were there. Gene Pagoni, director, Miranair, etc." So you can see his connections in some way, but I will say the names that really prove to be pivotal and come up a lot are people like Leon Black, the investor and former CEO of Apollo Global Management. So for example, there is an email from May 26, 2023. The names are redacted, but the subject line is E-Notes Trafficking Leon Black Call. And this apparently is a call with G.N. Christensen from Wigdor LLP. This is a law firm. And this firm actually at one point represented a woman who claimed she was raped by Leon Black, but they eventually wanted to withdraw from the case. And anyway, the email states, quote, "Leon Black, Wall Street person, 72 or 71 years old now, founded largest private equity global fund that exists today that's publicly traded, one of Epstein's friends, very powerful. Got a call from victim woman who said that she heard about lawsuit against Black. Victim said Black raped her around 20 years ago, 2001 or 2002, in Epstein's townhouse. Victim described it, felt pain, on massage table with head on floor and legs on his shoulders, excruciating. Spoke with redacted at Manhattan DA's office. Substance abuse problems in 1990s, preyed on by Epstein, gave massages to Epstein and Black for money." Another claim. Minor victim at Epstein's townhouse and was told to give Leon Black a massage. Violently raped by Black. 16 years old when raped by Black. Epstein and Black used to talk about victim and described her as being 10. They knew about her. Redacted. And when you couple those allegations with emails apparently showing Epstein associates arranging meetings between him and Black, I mean, there's one, Leon Black will come see J.E. tomorrow at 10 a.m. He may want breakfast. Please be prepared. It doesn't look good. And while Black's lawyer, Susan Estrich, previously denied the allegations, for example, saying in a statement Mr. Black asked for an independent investigation of his relationship with Epstein, the Detchert law firm investigated and reviewed more than 60,000 documents, interviewed more than 20 people, and concluded that Mr. Black paid Epstein for estate planning and tax advice and that he had no awareness of Epstein's criminal activities, there was still fallout. Black reportedly left Apollo in 2021 after a lot of questions came up about his relationship with Epstein, although he said it was for health reasons. But how about this? You had a school photography company known as Lifetouch came under a lot of scrutiny recently because it turns out its parent company, Shutterfly, was owned by Apollo, again, where Black worked. So the concern is you're storing all these photos of kids. They put out a statement on their website on February 10th saying Lifetouch is not named in the Epstein files. The documents contain no allegations that Lifetouch itself was involved in or that student photos were used in any illicit activities. And it also should be noted that Apollo wasn't linked to Shutterfly and Lifetouch until September of 2019, so this is 1 month after Epstein died. By the way, Black has never been charged with a crime in connection with these allegations. But also another person I got to talk about, Richard Branson, okay, the billionaire founder of Virgin Group. Now, his association with Epstein was already quite known, considering the two were photographed together. But let me just expand upon that, because you can see so many emails exchanged between the two or trying to connect the two. Like you have this one from 2013 to Jeffrey Epstein that reads, Richard Branson is unable to come to your island because he has guests, but he wants to extend an invitation to you for lunch on Sunday. Dean Kamen and Greg Weiler will be going as well to this lunch. Or how about this one from November 2013, where Epstein writes to Branson's assistant, I can send heli or meet anywhere. And Branson's assistant replies, Hi, Jeffrey. If Richard comes to you for lunch, would he have to go through immigration and customs on St. Thomas? Is there a quick way of getting through? And then you have direct communications, like this one from Branson to Epstein in September of 2013. Dear Jeffrey, it was really nice seeing you yesterday. The boys in water sports can't stop speaking about it. Anytime you're in the area, would love to see you, as long as you bring your harem. I think if Bill Gates was willing to say that you've been a brilliant advisor to him, that you slipped up many years ago by sleeping with a 17-and-a-half-year-old woman and were punished for it, that you've more than learnt your lesson and have done nothing that's against the law since, and yes, as a single man, you seem to have a penchant for women, but there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, something along those lines. So I have to make the argument, is that seemingly in relation to his conviction, right? A way to rehabilitate his image to get more business? Maybe. Now, Branson's company came out, denied that he had any involvement in Epstein's wrongdoing, that his meetings with him were limited to group or business settings, and that he cut off ties with Jeffrey Epstein after they, quote, uncovered serious allegations. And by the way, in a statement, Branson's company says, had they had the full picture and information, there would have been no contact whatsoever. Richard believes that Epstein's actions were abhorrent and supports the right to justice for his many victims. What about United States Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick? I'm sure you heard his name in the news recently. So this is Epstein's former neighbor. He has been taking a lot of heat recently over his connection to Epstein. See, the problem for Lutnick is the files seem to show he was in contact with the convicted felon years after he claimed he cut off contact with him. Like you have this one from Lutnick, where he writes Jeffrey Epstein, I believe in 2018, Are you aware as to them building to block our park views? What should we do about it? Time is of the essence. There appears to be an invitation to Epstein from Lutnick asking him to attend a Hillary Clinton fundraiser in 2015. You have this email from Epstein's assistant in 2017. Hello, Amanda. Jeffrey Epstein will be contributing to the UJA Wall Street dinner honoring Howard Lutnick. Can you please provide an address to where we can FedEx a check to? Whose attention? Anything else we should know? And how about these from 2012? An email from Lutnick to Epstein. Hi, Jeff. We're landing in St. Thomas early Saturday afternoon and planning to head over to St. Bart's, Anguilla on Monday at some point. Where are you located? What's the exact location for my captain? Does Sunday evening for dinner sound good? I have another couple, Michael and Marcy Lehrman, with me on my boat, and each of us has 4 children, 2 16s, 2 14s, a 13, a 12, an 11, and a 7-year-old. Thanks, Howard. The response back, quote, below from Jeffrey, comes Saturday or Sunday lunch, Little St. James on the map behind Chrisman's Cove. By the way, there are currently calls for Lutnick to resign, but nothing has come of it yet. But But the fallout for others, not so great. Like you have Larry Summers, former head of Harvard, Treasury Secretary. The friendship between Summers and Epstein's was well reported. You had the Harvard paper, The Crimson, revealing a lot, that Summers had apparently visited Epstein's island in 2005. There were flight records as part of a lawsuit that revealed he had traveled on Epstein's plane multiple times. But then you get these emails that come forward, and you see all these communications between the men, like where Summers was looking for Epstein for seemingly romantic advice, with Epstein saying, quote, "He's a pretty good wingman. I didn't want to be in a gift-giving competition while being the friend without benefits." You have this exchange from just months before Epstein was arrested in 2019, where Summers writes about some woman. "I said, 'What are you up to?' She said, 'I'm busy.' I said, 'Awfully coy you are.' Epstein responds, 'She's smart, making you pay for past errors. Ignore the daddy, I'm going to go out with the motorcycle guy. You reacted well. Annoyed shows caring. No whining showed strength." Now, Summers released a statement that said, "I'm deeply ashamed of my actions and recognize the pain they have caused. I take full responsibility for my misguided decision to continue communicating with Mr. Epstein." But he ended up stepping back from his duties at Harvard. He resigned from his board position at OpenAI. Now, again, to be clear, just a mere association or mention or emails or correspondence doesn't mean that anyone had knowledge of criminal wrongdoing or participated in criminal wrongdoing. And just to be clear as well, no one has been charged other than Maxwell and Epstein. But again, that is just a sampling of some of the things we're seeing as the names were released. You can go and do your own research and see what you find. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. We're also up on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.